What's up, everybody? I'm Zeke from CodeForDesigners.com, and I'm here with a Level Up Friday. If you don't know what Level Up Fridays are, that's A-OK. They're bite-sized tutorials designed to help you improve as a coder over the course of your lunch break. Today, I'm going to talk to you about something I think it's just really kind of a cool trick called CSS Counters. You're going to find these useful in scenarios where you really need to style something like an ordered list where, maybe on a marketing website you have like a series of steps that are easy as 1, 2, 3, or maybe you just simply want your regular ordered list to just look a little better. In this video, I'm going to show you how to do that really quickly with a bulleted list, and then I'll also show you kind of an example I've mocked up just so you can see what it might look like if you implemented it on a website or something. In the description, I have a link to a starter pin. There's not a lot in there, so you can start with your own deal if you wanted to, but just go ahead and hit that fork button. I'm not going to because I've already forked my code, but then you can also go in here and just change your name to whatever you'd like it to be. I'm changing it to final because, it's going to make it easier for me to track later. Now, to get started, the first thing I'm going to do is create an ordered list here. You'll see I'll just have, a bunch of list items. I'll just do 1, 2, oops, typo, 3. And so you'll see I have 3 list items. That's great. The problem when you start wanting to style stuff like this is it's really hard to get good control of it. And so, for example, I'm going to just try a few things that might, affect like the color, right? Like maybe you want to change this to that's an insanely bright blue, right? But what happens when you want to make the list item itself a different text color? Well, maybe you can wrap the text in a span. Maybe you can do something else. It gets weird and complicated. So what I'm going to do instead is actually create a CSS counter that's going to track all of my numbers. And so what I mean by that is, let's say, for example, let's just take away the list style so we don't see the numbers anymore. So, list style none gives us that. Just hit the save button. Now, there's a CSS like pseudo element called before and after that you can use to do some additional things. It really kind of behaves almost like it's an HTML element. One of those things you can do with a pseudo element is provide it with content. You can't do this on a regular element. So inside of that list item, there's a pseudo element called before. And, maybe that's what I want to use, right? I can do 1, 2, 3, 4. This would be a great way to actually get the ability to style this list item independently. Because now I can tell it I want it to display as like an inline block. I can do things like assign it some margin to the right, 20 pixels, and let's kill that. I can make it more, I can make it less. I could change the color. And that blue is very bright, so I'm just going to calm that blue down a little bit. But something like that is going to be, kind of a nice little shade of blue. I could change its font size independently. As you can imagine, the list of things I could do it goes on because I have this as a separate element that I can work with now. The problem is I need that number to change almost instinctively, to change based on where it is in my list. I don't want to do this manually. So in order to get that done, this is where CSS Counter comes into play. I'm just going to type counter reset. To use it, you actually have to reset the counter first and then use it in the block. And so I need to provide it with a name. In this case, I think I'm just going to call it, my list. And now I can access counter. I don't need that. Counter my list. And you'll see I get 3 zeros now in front of, my list items, which is pretty close to what I want. Now I just need to make sure those numbers increment every time that I have an item in the list, no matter how many items there are. So to do that, all you have to do is call, you know what, you don't even need it. You don't even need it before the content. You can just anywhere here call counter-reset, not rest, reset, and provide it with the name of the counter. Oops, and counter not reset, sorry about that, counter increment. Use counter increment. And you'll see now I'm getting the 1, 2, 3. So that's really nice. Now I can start to do things with those numbers that look and feel very different than just a 1, a 2, or a 3. Now, before I move too far on, I want to show you also if you wanted to add just like a period, you could. So you could just provide like a little space and do a period, and you would see that appear. Or, and this is really helpful, if you had a series of steps, you can just say step. Let's provide it with a space. And if you wanted to add like a colon, you could. You see how you can really change what you're displaying and use it to really kind of explain things a little differently. Let's clean a few things out of there. And I'll just show you what it feels like now to just kind of style this thing. I think one of the typical things that you might end up doing is, wrapping this thing in like a circle. So let's do that. And I'm just going to use the width property. That feels fairly big. I'll do width 40 pixels. I'm also going to do line height to match. And I'll show you why in a moment I'm using line height and not height. And let's give our thing a little bit of a background. So I'm going to take this color, move it to our background, and make our text white. And now we can just sort of center things. So I'll just do text align center, and that will kind of center our number right there on the screen. Now, I promised I'll show you exactly why I used line height instead of height. Line height, as you know, really determines the space, I guess, in between lines of text. But it's really helpful in CSS because you can also use that in instances where you know you're not going to break the text for it to be vertically centered. And so if I would have used height here, you'll see that I would have still had to figure out a way to vertically center the text. You can use height and line height and just provide it with the same numbers. I'm just doing this because it's going to be a little simpler. And I know I'm not going to break the text. And, for me, I imagine these as just sort of rounded deals. So I'm just going to do a border radius 50% to make it a circle. And you can see it's really starting to come together. If I wanted to provide a little bit of space in between things, I can. So I'm just going to let's just say 16 pixels. Put some space in between each list item. But you can kind of see now that I'm getting exactly what I want. You can do any number of the tricks you already know for positioning things to make this work, but ultimately you're getting a much more styled look at what those list items can be. And just as I promised, it doesn't matter how many list items you add. Let's say lorem, lorem. you'll see I'm getting exactly what I want. Now I can clean up the orientation here of the bullets, because you see it's kind of running in line, which is forcing a weird amount of line height from the first line to the second line. I can totally fix that. The way you would actually do that is just by using, sort of your positioning tricks to provide the list item with some padding and take the actual bullet out of the flow of the text. So I'll show you what that looks like. So I'm just going to do a position relative here, which will give me a new context. I'm also going to add a little bit of padding to the left, which is going to be bigger than that bullet. So my bullet was 40 pixels. Let's call it 50 pixels. And now on I guess a bullet's a bad name for it, but my number that's counting the list items, I'm going to go ahead and just give it a position absolute. And I'm going to say top 0, left 0. And now you can see it's really kind of falling in line with what we expected. Looking at the padding, I want to now center. As you see, like this first bullet point, it's not vertically centered. So, you might want to make some adjustments there. I'm going to guess 10 pixels. But yeah, you see how easily you could kind of solve those problems and work around the bullets. You can really style this in any way you wanted it to be. And I find it's really helpful for those sort of like 1, 2, 3 scenarios, or maybe it's an FAQ and you really need something that feels a little more graphically nice. Now, as I promised, I wanted to show you a second example of what you could really do with this. And so I've created this example. It's what you might see for a marketing website, right? Like the steps are easy as 1, 2, 3. And you can see I've kind of got these numbered steps embedded in the card, but I didn't have to create text for each of those. Let me change my layout so you can see the HTML a little bit better. But as you see, I'm effectively, there's no number here written into my HTML. In fact, I'm not even using list items. What I'm doing is wrapping everything inside of this card steps thing, and every card is being incremented on. And you can see it's the same steps, right? I've got counter, reset, card steps. And when you look at my card number, I'm actually incrementing card steps actually on the card itself. But as you see, I added some content to my card number. I had to use the before pseudo element because you can only add content to pseudo elements, not the regular element. It really is just kind of the same deal wrapped into a different scenario. I find this really helpful and really useful. It was one of the tricks I gravitated towards when I first needed to figure out how can I really style a list. As always, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. Leave a comment on YouTube, or write something in our Facebook page, or send us a message on Twitter. If you're not subscribed to the newsletter, please do. There's going to be some really exciting stuff I'm working on that I can't wait to share with you all. And above all else, happy coding.